The sun had just crested the low hills when Wyatt Cole arrived at the outer fence of the hacienda. It was a vast place by the standards of northern Mexico. The whitewashed adobe walls, weathered to the color of bone, stood firm against the heat. Red clay roofs, patched and repatched over the years, covered the buildings with wide corrals stretching across the dry grassland. Horses stamped and snorted behind the rough wooden rails. The air was thick with the scent of sweat and earth lingering at the gate like a quiet invitation. Wyatt had learned long ago never to enter uninvited. At 30, he stood just over 6 feet, his broad shoulders and lean, muscular frame a testament to years of hard, underpaid labor. His skin bore the unmistakable mark of his Apache blood, dark-weathered, shaped by the sun rather than comfort. His hair was tied back in a simple, practical knot. His clothes, though clean, were worn thin, and his boots cracked at the seams. He carried no weapon by choice. After a moment, a foreman approached, chewing slowly on something. The foreman's eyes narrowed as they traveled over Wyatt's face. "What do you want?" he asked in a thick Spanish accent. "I'm looking for work," Wyatt replied, his voice steady. His accent was slight but noticeable. "I know horses," he added. The foreman snorted. "Everyone knows horses." Wyatt's eyes remained calm. "I know when they're sick before they go lame. I know how to calm a stud that's about to kill a boy. I know how to clean stalls so flies don't carry rot." The foreman studied him for a moment, then spat into the dirt. "Wait here." Wyatt waited, his gaze fixed on the ground. From the main house, Sam Rook emerged. Sam was a large man, thick through the middle, dressed more finely than anyone else on the property. His boots were polished and his belt buckle gleamed under the sun. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never been told no and never expected to be. He stopped a few feet from Wyatt, eyeing him up and down with open disdain. "Apache," Sam said flatly, not even bothering to make it a question. "Yes," Wyatt answered, meeting his gaze without challenge or submission. Sam's lips curled into a slight sneer. "Why would I hire you?" Wyatt didn't hesitate. "Because your horses are worth more than the men who clean after them." Sam let out a short, humorless laugh. "You'll take orders," he said. "You'll sleep where you're told. You'll be paid when I decide you've earned it." "I didn't come to Arxrizo," Wyatt replied calmly. "I came to work." Sam studied him for a moment before waving a dismissive hand. "Stalls. If one horse limps because of you, I'll have you beaten and thrown off my land." Wyatt nodded once. Understood. That's how it began. The stables were long and low, dim, despite the open doors. Wyatt went to work without complaint, scrubbing and hauling water buckets that weighed nearly 40 pounds each. He moved with steady, efficient purpose, ignoring the curious glances from the other hands. There were many men and women alike. Most kept their heads down. That's when he noticed her. She was in the far field, carrying a sack of hay, nearly as wide as her shoulders. The sack must have weighed at least 80 pounds, maybe more. It bent her forward slightly, the strap digging into her collarbone. Her dress was faded and patched, and her boots were caked with mud. She didn't stop. Wyatt paused, resting his shovel as he watched her cross the field, her steps careful but deliberate. She looked thin, too thin for work like that. When she reached the barn, the sack slipped from her shoulders. She caught it before it could fall. Her jaw tightened, her breath sharp but silent. Without thinking, Wyatt walked toward her. "Let me take that," he said softly, reaching for the strap. She spun around quickly, her eyes flashing. "No, it's too heavy," he said calmly. "I said no." Her voice was firm, edged with something more than pride. Fear, maybe, or habit. Wyatt let his hand fall away. "As you wish." She adjusted the strap and continued on, her muscles trembling, her spine straight. As she passed him, she muttered, "I can do my own work." Wyatt watched her go, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Not weak, he thought, just alone. By nightfall, Wyatt Cole's arms ached and his back burned with the weight of the day. But the horses were fed, watered, and calmer than they'd been that morning. Wyatt noticed things others didn't: the mare limping on her left hind leg, a young colt restless from a cracked hoof. No one thanked him. He slept in a narrow room off the stables, the air thick and close rain clouds gathering outside. When the storm came, it hit hard, and sudden rain pounding the roofs like gravel thrown from the sky. Late into the night, Wyatt heard a soft curse, carried by the wind. He stepped outside and saw light flickering from the workers' quarters. Water streamed from a broken section of roof, soaking the ground beneath. Clara Boone had learned his name from one of the other hands. She stood outside her door, staring at the leak as if willing it to stop. Without a word, Wyatt grabbed some scrap wood and climbed up onto the roof. The rain soaked him through in seconds. He worked by feel, more than sight, hammering boards into place, sealing the gaps with pitch, until the water slowed, then stopped. When he climbed down, Clara stood holding a lantern. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he replied. She hesitated, then spoke quietly. "I thought Apache men were cruel." He raised an eyebrow. "And now?" She swallowed. "I was wrong. I'm sorry. I was rude to you the first day." Wyatt shrugged. "Beautiful women are often allowed to be." Her cheeks flushed color blooming beneath the grime. No one had spoken to her like that in a long time. Maybe ever. She ducked her head, embarrassed, and for the first time she smiled. The rain eased. Somewhere a horse whinnied softly. In that brief, unguarded moment, something shifted, small, quiet, but irreversible, between the Apache, who had come looking for work, and the woman who carried hay, as if the world expected nothing less. Morning came pale and dry, the storm leaving behind only the smell of wet earth and the promise of heat. By the time the sun climbed over the eastern ridge, the mud had already started to crack beneath the weight of boots and hooves. Wyatt was back in the stables before most of the hands had finished their first bitter cup of coffee. He worked in the half-light, brushing down the horses, checking legs and hooves, the way he'd been taught, speaking low, patiently, so the animals knew his voice. He didn't look for Clara, yet he noticed when she appeared. She came from the hay sheds, sleeves rolled up her shoulders, already damp with sweat. Two men followed behind her, laughing as they talked among themselves. When she bent to lift a bale, neither of the men moved to help. The bale was square and tightly packed, close to 100 pounds. Clara braced herself, teeth clenched, and heaved it onto her shoulder. The men watched, amused, as if it were a sport. Something tight coiled in Wyatt's chest. He stepped forward. "That one's too heavy," he said, keeping his voice even. "Split it." Clara shot him a look sharp enough to cut. "Mind your own work." The men snorted. "She's got more grit than you, Apache." Wyatt ignored them. He kept his eyes on Clara. "You don't have to prove anything." Her jaw set. "I prove it every day." She walked past him, the bale digging into her shoulder. For a moment, Wyatt considered taking it from her, force be damned, but he stopped himself. He had learned through bitter experience that taking a choice away from someone could wound deeper than any blow. So he watched her go, step by careful step, until she reached the feed trough and let the bale drop with a dull thud. Only then did she pause, breath coming hard, hands braced on her knees. Later, when the yard had emptied and the sun stood high enough to bleach the world pale, Wyatt found Clara alone near the well, washing dirt from her hands. "You shouldn't carry that kind of weight alone," he said quietly. She didn't look up. "If I wait for help here, I'll wait forever." He considered that. "You won't always be here." That made her laugh, short and humorless. "That's what they all say." Then years pass. She turned, then studying him more closely than she had before. "Why do you care?" Wyatt met her gaze. "Because I know what it costs." She searched his face as if deciding whether to believe him. Finally she nodded. "Was it hard?" Wyatt's lips twitched. "It never gets easy." They stood there a moment longer, the well creaking behind them, the sound of horses shifting in the distance. From that day on, Wyatt Cole and Clara Boone spoke when they could, brief exchanges stolen between tasks. A word here, a glance there. Nothing that would draw attention, nothing that could be twisted. But people noticed, as they always did in a place like the hacienda. Rumors spread faster than dust devils crossing the fields. A glance lingered too long, a word spoken too softly. Sam Rook noticed too. He had always kept his eye on Clara. That afternoon he called her over, while Wyatt was currying a chestnut mare. "You're looking thin," Sam said, his eyes roaming freely over her. "I could move you inside. Lighter work." Clara stiffened. "I'm fine where I am." Sam smiled slow and knowing. "I could make things easier for you." "I don't need favors," she replied firmly. His smile vanished. Everyone needs something. Wyatt felt the mare tense beneath his hands. Every muscle in his body screamed for him to intervene, but he didn't. Not yet. That night Clara worked late, hauling the last of the hay into the barn. By the time she finished, the sky had gone dark and stars sharpened cold above. She misjudged a step coming down from the loft. The sack slipped. She stumbled, catching herself just before she fell, but not before pain shot through her ankle. Wyatt was there in 2 strides. "Say it," he said softly. "I'm fine," she insisted, trying to put weight on it. She wasn't. Without a word, Wyatt knelt. His fingers were gentle as he tested the joint. It was already swelling. "You'll make it worse," he said. "Let me help." This time she didn't refuse. He lifted the sack from her shoulder, then took her arm and guided her to the edge of the stall. She leaned against the wood, breathing through clenched teeth. "I hate this," she said softly, needing help. "So do I," Wyatt replied. "That doesn't make it wrong." He wrapped her ankle with a strip torn from his own shirt, tight enough to support, loose enough not to cut off circulation. "Why stay here?" she asked suddenly. "They'll never see you as anything but what you are to them." Wyatt tied the knot and sat back on his heels. "Because leaving without a place to go is another kind of chain." Clara considered that. "You talk like someone who's run before." He didn't answer. From then on, Wyatt began quietly shifting the work when he could, taking the heaviest loads before Clara reached them, loosening bales so they were easier to carry, fixing broken tools so they didn't slow her down. She noticed. "You don't have to do this," she said one evening. "I know," he replied. Her gaze softened. "Thank you." It wasn't much, but in a place where gratitude was rare and kindness was dangerous, it meant more than either of them said aloud. And though neither spoke it, both understood the truth forming between them. In a land that taught people to survive by hardness alone, even the smallest mercy carried weight, sometimes more than 100-pound bale of hay. The heat settled in early that week, the kind that pressed down on a man's shoulders and stayed there. By mid-morning, the air above the field shimmered and the horses grew restless, swishing their tails and stamping as flies gathered thick around their legs. Wyatt worked shirtless now, his back darkened by the sun. Muscles moved with quiet economy as he mucked stalls and hauled water. Each bucket weighed close to 40 pounds, and he carried 2 at a time, pacing himself the way long habit had taught him. He spoke to the horses more than to the people. Animals at least didn't pretend. Clara still worked the fields. Her ankle had healed enough for her to walk without favoring it, though Wyatt noticed she still moved carefully when she thought no one was watching. She had grown accustomed to his presence, not in the way one grows careless, but in the way one comes to rely on something solid without naming it. They shared water when the overseer wasn't looking. They exchanged small observations, the way the wind was turning the look of the clouds, the smell of rain long before it arrived. The storm came late on a Thursday night. The sky darkened, fast wind sweeping down from the hills, carrying grit that stung the eyes. Thunder cracked sharp and close, rattling the adobe walls. Rain came down in sheets, heavy and relentless. Wyatt Cole woke to the sound of water where it wasn't supposed to be. He stepped outside, rain soaking his trousers immediately, and saw light spilling from the workers' quarters. Water streamed off the roof in uneven curtains. One section sagged the wood, beneath swollen and eroding. Clara's room. Wyatt crossed the yard in a hurry. Inside, Clara stood barefoot on the packed dirt floor, holding her blanket away from the steady drip falling onto her bed. Her hair hung loose, darkened by the damp. Her face, usually set with resolve, was pale with exhaustion. "It's getting worse," she said when she saw him. "I tried moving the bed." "Get out of the rain," Wyatt said, not waiting for permission. He grabbed a lantern and climbed the ladder to the roof, the rungs slick beneath his hands. The wind tore at his shirt. Rain blurred his vision. He found the break by touch, his fingers sinking into the softened wood. The repair was rough but effective. He nailed a board across the worst of it, sealed the gaps with tar he'd taken from the tack shed weeks ago, then weighted it down with stones. By the time he climbed down, he was soaked through, arms trembling from the strain. Inside, the drip had slowed to nothing. Clara stared at the ceiling, then at him. "You'll get sick doing things like that." "Wouldn't be the first time," he replied. She handed him a towel. Their fingers brushed briefly, and something passed between them, uncertain, unspoken. She hesitated, then said, "I owe you an apology." Wyatt raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For the first day, for thinking things," she said quietly. "I was taught that Apache men were dangerous, that they couldn't be trusted." And now, Wyatt asked, his eyes locking with hers, "Now I think I was taught wrong." He considered that, then shrugged lightly. "People believe what keeps them safe." She shook her head. "No. Sometimes they believe what keeps them from having to look closer." Silence settled between them, broken only by the rain easing outside. "I'm sorry," she said again. Wyatt smiled, faint but real. "Beautiful women are often forgiven for worse." Her cheeks flushed, and she laughed softly despite herself. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because I forget how to answer." That night, something shifted. Not in any grand or reckless way. There was no promise made, no line crossed. But from then on, their conversations lingered longer. They shared stories, fragments of their pasts. Clara spoke of years spent in the fields of a mother buried far from home. Wyatt offered pieces of a childhood shaped by movement, by hardship, by learning when to stay silent. People began to notice. A glance held too long. Wyatt carrying a bale meant for Clara. Clara bringing him water without being asked. Whispers spread. One afternoon, Sam Rook cornered Wyatt near the stables. "You're getting comfortable," Sam said, his voice low. Wyatt met his gaze calmly. "I do my work." Sam stepped closer. "I don't pay you to look at my women. I look at horses," Wyatt replied. Sam's smile was thin. "See that you keep it that way." Wyatt said nothing. But that night, as he lay awake, listening to the wind scrape the walls, he knew the ground beneath them was shifting. The next day the heat broke. A sudden downpour flooded the lower field, turning dust into mud. Clara slipped while carrying a crate of feed and went down hard. Wyatt was at her side before anyone else moved. Her knee was scraped, raw blood mixing with dirt. She tried to laugh it off. "I'm fine," she said. "You're bleeding," he replied. He cleaned the wound, gently, his hands steady. Clara watched him, noticing the scar along his forearm, pale and old. "From a rifle wound?" she asked when she saw her gaze linger. "Years ago," Wyatt said. "Does it still hurt only when it rains?" She smiled sadly. "Then I suppose you felt it last night." Wyatt nodded. "Some hurts don't ever leave." They sat there longer than necessary, the rain softening the world around them. Clara spoke first. "If things get worse here..." She trailed off. Wyatt waited. "I don't want you thinking you owe me anything," Clara said. "You don't." Wyatt Cole looked at her, really saw her, the strength worn thin from years of labor, the resolve that kept her standing when others would have bent. "I don't do this because I owe you," he said. I do it because I choose to. That was the moment Clara understood. Not the danger that had been clear for some time, but the cost. And when she met his eyes, she didn't look away. Outside, the rain washed the yard clean, as if trying to rinse away all that the world refused to face. The tensions didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slow and quiet, like rot beneath the surface until the weight became too much to bear. Sam Rook watched Clara more openly now. He lingered when she passed, found reasons to call her over, spoke to her in a voice he didn't use with anyone else, promises wrapped in suggestions. Threats followed when she refused. You could be inside, Sam said one afternoon, his hand resting too casually on the fence rail. Cleaner work, lighter hours. I'm not interested, Clara replied, eyes fixed on the ground. Sam's smile thinned. Everyone's interested in something. She straightened, lifting her chin. You have a wife. Children. Leave me alone. For a moment, something dark flickered behind his eyes. Then he laughed as if amused by a child's defiance. You'd best be careful, Sam said softly. People like you don't last long here without protection. Clara said nothing more. She walked away, her legs feeling unsteady, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might make her dizzy. That night Sam drank. The sound carried across the yard, the clink of glass, the raised voice, the heavy footsteps following long after the lamps should have been out. Clara lay awake on her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening. When the knock came, it wasn't gentle. She froze. The door opened without waiting for an answer. Sam filled the frame, his presence looming. The smell of liquor was sharp on his breath. His eyes were glassy, unfocused, in a way that made fear bloom in her chest. You think you're better than me, he slurred. Get out, Clara said, pushing herself upright. Leave now. He laughed, stepping inside, kicking the door shut behind him. No one tells me what to do in my own house. Clara moved toward the door. He grabbed her arm. She screamed. It tore from her chest, raw and desperate, echoing into the night. But the hacienda was a place where screams were learned to be ignored. Wyatt Cole heard it from the stables. He didn't think. He ran. By the time he reached the workers' quarters, the door to Clara's room was shut. Sam's voice, low and thick, came from behind it. Wyatt didn't hesitate. He drew back his boot and kicked the door. It flew open, the latch splintering under the force. Sam spun around, rage flaring across his face. Clara stood pressed against the wall, trembling, her dress torn at the sleeve. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then Wyatt moved. His fist connected with Sam's jaw hard enough to send him stumbling back into the table. Glass shattered. Sam roared and lunged, but Wyatt was faster. Stronger, fueled by something older than fear. Another blow and Sam fell hard, sprawled across the floor. You'll regret this. Sam spat blood on his lips. You won't leave this place alive. Wyatt stood over him, chest heaving, hands clenched. He didn't say a word. He turned to Clara instead. Are you hurt? She shook her head, tears streaking her face. I tried to scream. You did, Wyatt said. That's enough. He led her out into the night, away from the broken door and the man on the floor. They didn't make it far before the other hands appeared, drawn by the noise. They looked at Sam, then at Wyatt, and then one by one they looked away. Sam's men moved quickly after that. Wyatt was dragged to the yard, beaten with fists and boots until his vision blurred and his ribs burned with every breath. Sam stood nearby, watching, his jaw set in satisfaction. That's your warning, Sam Rook said coldly. You touch what's mine again and you'll be buried where no one will miss you. They left Wyatt Cole lying in the dirt. Clara Boone knelt beside him once the yard had emptied, her hand shaking as she pressed a cloth to his split lip. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears falling freely now. I never wanted this to happen to you. Wyatt winced as she cleaned the blood from his cheek. His face was already swelling, one eye nearly swollen shut. Don't, he said hoarsely. You didn't cause this. Clara shook her head. If I hadn't. Wyatt reached for her hand, his fingers curling around hers despite the pain. His grip was steady. I chose, he said. From the moment I kicked that door, I chose. Her breath caught. Why? He looked at her, then really looked at her as if the bruises, the threats and the fear had stripped the world down to its barest truth. Because I love you, he said simply. The words settled between them, heavy and undeniable. She leaned forward, pressing her lips to his, gentle at first, then desperate, tasting blood and longing. It wasn't a careful kiss. It was a vow made without witnesses. They pulled apart only when he hissed in pain. You're hurt, she said, panic flooding back. I've been hurt before, he replied. This was worth it. They sat together in the dark, Clara cradling his battered face, the world around them, indifferent. Neither spoke of what would come next, but both understood the truth now. Clear as the stars breaking through the clouds above. There would be no safety here anymore, only choices and consequences. The morning came hard and bright, the kind of light that showed every bruise and offered no mercy. Wyatt woke on a pallet near the stables, his body stiff and aching as if every bone had been counted and found wanting. His ribs screamed when he drew breath. One eye was swollen nearly shut. Dried blood crusted along his mouth. Clara was there, kneeling beside him, holding a tin cup of water. Easy, she said when he tried to sit up. You cracked 2 ribs, maybe more. He gave a crooked smile. You sound like a doctor. I've seen enough broken men here to recognize one. She helped him drink. The water was warm, but it eased the fire in his throat. You should have let them finish me, he murmured. Would have been simpler. She shook her head fiercely. Don't say that, not ever. Before he could answer, heavy footsteps crossed the yard. Sam's wife arrived like a storm that had been gathering all night. May Rook was a tall woman, straight-backed, dressed in mourning black, though her husband still lived. Years of managing the household had hardened her face into something sharp and watchful. 2 servants followed her eyes, fixed on the ground. She stopped a few feet from Clara. What happened? May demanded. Sam appeared behind her, freshly washed, a bandage wrapped around his jaw. He didn't look at Wyatt. She tried to seduce me, Sam said calmly. When I refused, she screamed. The Apache attacked me. Clara stared at him, disbelief stealing her breath. That's a lie, she said. You came into my room. May raised her hand. Enough. Her gaze cut to Clara, cold and appraising. Is this true? Clara looked to the others gathered nearby, the hands, the servants, the men who had heard her scream, and turned away. One by one, they lowered their eyes. No one spoke. Clara's voice shook. Please ask them. Silence answered. May's mouth tightened. She stepped forward and struck Clara across the face. The sound was sharp as a gunshot. You disgrace this house, May said. You think I don't know what women like you do to climb out of the dirt? Clara tasted blood. You are dismissed, May continued. Leave my property before sundown. Take nothing. Clara swayed but didn't fall. Wyatt tried to stand. 2 men blocked him. You'll go too, May said without looking at him. You're fleeced in, both of you. Sam Rook finally turned, his eyes gleaming with malice. Be grateful I don't have you killed, he sneered. Touch what's mine again, and I'll bury you where no one will find you. With that, he left Wyatt Cole lying in the dirt. Clara Boone knelt beside him once the yard emptied, her hand trembling as she pressed a cloth to his split lip. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I never wanted this to happen to you. Wyatt winced as she cleaned the blood from his cheek, his face already swelling, one eye almost completely shut. Don't apologize, he said hoarsely. You didn't cause this. She shook her head. If I hadn't. Wyatt reached out, his fingers curling around hers despite the pain. His grip was steady. I chose, he said. looking at her with something deeper in his eyes. From the moment I kicked that door, I chose. Her breath caught. Why Wyatt looked at her, really looked at her, stripped of all the bruises and threats. "Because I love you," he said simply. The words settled between them, heavy and undeniable. Clara leaned forward, pressing her lips to his, gentle at first, then urgent, tasting blood and yearning. It wasn't a careful kiss. It was a vow made without witnesses. They pulled apart only when Wyatt hissed in pain. "You're hurt," Clara said, panic rising again. "I've been hurt before," Wyatt replied, "but this was worth it." They sat together in the quiet of the night, Clara cradling his battered face, the world indifferent around them. Neither spoke of what would come next, but both understood the truth now, clear as the stars breaking through the clouds above them. There would be no safety here anymore, only choices and consequences. The next morning came with a harsh light showing every bruise, offering no mercy. Wyatt woke on a pallet near the stables, his body aching as if every bone had been counted and found wanting. His ribs screamed with every breath. One eye was swollen shut, dried blood crusted along his mouth. Clara was there, kneeling beside him, holding a tin cup of water. "Take it easy," she said, her voice gentle as he tried to sit up. "You cracked 2 ribs, maybe more." Wyatt gave her a crooked smile. "You sound like a doctor. I've seen enough broken men to know what that looks like." She helped him drink. The water was warm, but soothed the fire in his throat. "You should have let them finish me," he murmured. "Would have been simpler." She shook her head fiercely. "Don't say that. Not ever." Before he could reply, the sound of heavy footsteps crossed the yard. Sam's wife, May Rook, arrived like a storm that had been building all night. May was tall, her back straight, wearing mourning black, despite her husband still being alive. The years spent running the house had etched a hard, sharp look on her face. 2 servants trailed behind her, their eyes downcast. She stopped a few feet from Clara. "What happened?" May demanded. Sam appeared behind her, freshly washed, a bandage wrapped around his jaw. He didn't even glance at Wyatt. "She tried to seduce me," Sam said, his voice calm. "When I refused, she screamed. The Apache attacked me." Clara stared at him, disbelief stealing her breath. "That's a lie," she said. "You came into my room." May raised her hand. "Enough." Her eyes locked onto Clara, cold and assessing. "Is this true?" May asked. Clara looked to the others nearby, the hands, the servants, the men who had heard her scream, and turned away. One by one they lowered their eyes. No one spoke. Clara's voice shook. "Please ask them." Silence. May's lips pressed together in a thin line. She stepped forward and struck Clara across the face. The sound was sharp, like the crack of a whip. "You disgrace this house," May said. "You think I don't know what women like you do to climb out of the dirt?" Clara tasted blood. "You are dismissed," May said coldly. "Leave my property before sundown. Take nothing." Clara swayed but didn't fall. Wyatt tried to stand, but 2 men blocked him. "You're going too," May said, not even looking at Wyatt. "You're both out." Wyatt Cole had shaped the ring from silver traded for pelts, simple and slightly uneven. "I don't have words for promises," he said. "Only work," he added with a quiet smile. Clara Boone slid the ring onto her finger. "That's enough." They married themselves beside the creek with no witnesses, except the cottonwoods and the stallion grazing nearby. Clara wore a clean dress, sewn from feed sacks, her hands trembling only for a moment. Wyatt stood barefoot in the water, his reflection broken by the rippling current. They didn't speak vows. They didn't need to. They already knew them. Years passed, marked not by dates, but by the rhythm of the seasons. They had children, a son first, then a daughter. The boy learned to walk by gripping his father's fingers, his dark eyes full of wonder. The girl laughed at the sound of the water reaching for the creek as if she knew something ancient about it. The cabin grew worn in the best way, with scratched floors, door frames marked with the children's height, and a table carved with the memory of meals and plans. Word of them spread quietly. Travelers would stop by sometimes asking for water or directions. Wyatt helped when he could. Clara fed those who were hungry. They didn't ask questions that didn't matter. One summer evening, long after the children had fallen asleep, Wyatt and Clara sat on the porch they built with their own hands. Fireflies danced through the tall grass. The sunflower stood heavy with seed. "Do you ever think about going back?" Clara asked. Wyatt thought for a moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. She nodded. "Neither do I." Over the years, they'd heard rumors, Sam Rook growing richer, his wife growing colder, the hacienda expanding until it swallowed more land than it could tend. None of it touched them. What they had was smaller but stronger. Clara leaned her head against Wyatt's shoulder. His arms wrapped around her, solid and familiar. "We weren't meant to be owned," she said softly. "No," he replied, "only to choose." Above them, the stars stretched wide and indifferent. The same stars that had watched countless lives struggle and endure. The creek murmured on, steady and patient. And in that quiet, the truth of their life stood clear. They hadn't defeated the world. They'd simply stepped beyond its reach. And in doing so, they had built something no cruelty, no lie, no claim of power could take from them. This was a story about dignity, courage, and choosing freedom when the world offers only silence. If this journey moved you, please hit subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment so I can continue bringing you even more meaningful stories. Thank you all for listening. All stories are created for entertainment purposes and may include fictional elements or dramatized interpretations inspired by historical settings. We use AI tools, voiceover visuals, scripts as creative assistants. However, all content is reviewed, refined, and edited by humans to ensure emotional authenticity and storytelling quality. We fully comply with YouTube's policies regarding AI-generated content and do not use any deepfake techniques or misleading recreations of real individuals. All visuals and supporting materials are properly licensed. Sharing, re-uploading, modifying, or distributing any part of this content in any form requires written permission. We appreciate your support and respect for original creative work